Arthur Sterling sat in his mahogany-paneled office, a room that smelled of expensive leather and cold isolation. He was a man who had conquered the financial world, but his own home felt like a fortress of grief. 3 years ago, a tragic accident had claimed his wife's life and left his 7-year-old twin sons, Leo and Sam, paralyzed from the waist down. Since then, Arthur had become a man obsessed with control. He didn't trust anyone with his boys. He had installed a state-of-the-art, 360-degree camera system in every corner of their playroom and bedroom, watching the live feeds on a private monitor from his office. He had fired 12 nannies in 6 months for being negligent, which usually just meant they looked tired or bored. Then came Elena. She arrived at the iron gates of the Sterling Manor with nothing but a worn leather suitcase and an aura of quiet calm. She didn't flinch at the non-disclosure agreements or the cold, clinical list of rules Arthur handed her. He watched her on the monitors during her first hour. He expected her to do what the others did, hover awkwardly, try to force the boys to talk, or eventually sit in a corner scrolling on her phone. But Elena didn't do any of that. She didn't even look at the boys' wheelchairs. Instead, she sat on the floor, right in the middle of the room, and began to hum a melody that sounded like wind moving through autumn leaves. For the first week, Arthur was suspicious. He spent hours zoomed in on her hands, her expressions, looking for a slip-up. He saw her cleaning the boys' rooms with a meticulousness that bordered on devotion, but it was how she interacted with Leo and Sam that began to thaw the ice in Arthur's chest. The boys had been silent and withdrawn since the accident, their eyes dull. Elena didn't treat them like patients. One afternoon, Arthur watched through the camera as Elena brought in 3 large basins of water and different types of paper. She didn't ask them to play, she simply started folding a paper boat, talking to herself about the great voyage across the Sapphire Sea. Slowly, for the first time in years, Arthur saw Sam's hand reach out. The turning point came on a rainy Tuesday, 3 months into Elena's employment. Arthur was preparing for a multi-billion-dollar merger, his eyes flickering between his spreadsheets and the nursery feed. Suddenly, he saw Elena do something that made him freeze. She began moving the heavy mahogany furniture out of the center of the room. She rolled up the expensive Persian rug. Arthur reached for the intercom to bark a command for her to stop, but something stayed his hand. Elena disappeared for a moment and returned with a bucket of what looked like mud and several jars of bright, neon-colored finger paint stuff. He watched, horrified and fascinated, as she dumped the mud onto a plastic tarp she'd laid out and then began to smear the bright paints directly onto the hardwood floor in swirling patterns. He thought she had lost her mind. But then, she did the unthinkable. She lifted Leo and Sam out of their wheelchairs and placed them directly onto the floor in the middle of the mess. Arthur's heart hammered against his ribs. He was ready to sprint to the room to stop this insanity, but then he heard it. Through the high-definition speakers, a sound erupted that he hadn't heard in 3 years. Sam was laughing. It wasn't a small giggle, it was a deep, belly-shaking roar of pure joy. Elena wasn't just watching them. She was in the mud with them. She was showing them that they didn't need to be upright to be powerful. She turned the floor into a galaxy, using their paralyzed legs to paint long, sweeping nebulas of blue and gold as she dragged them gently through the colors. She was teaching them that their bodies were still instruments of creation, not just broken vessels. Arthur sat back in his chair, his eyes welling with tears. He realized that while he had been providing them with the best medical care and the highest security, he had been keeping them in a gilded cage. He had been so focused on what they had lost that he forgot to celebrate what they still had. The following morning, Arthur walked into the playroom. He didn't check the cameras first. He saw the remnants of the paint on the floor and the boys, exhausted but smiling in their sleep. Elena was quietly cleaning a corner of the room. Arthur approached her, his voice thick with emotion. He told her he had seen everything on the cameras. Elena stood up, wiped her hands on her apron, and looked him directly in the eye. She didn't apologize. She told him, "Mr. Sterling, you can spend your life watching them through a glass screen to make sure they don't break, or you can get down on the floor and help them build something new." That day changed the trajectory of the Sterling family. Arthur dismantled the intrusive camera system, realizing that trust was a more powerful guardian than surveillance. He started coming home early, not to supervise, but to play. He learned that inspiration doesn't come from a bank account or a position of power, but from the willingness to be vulnerable and the courage to see beauty in the broken pieces. Elena stayed with them for years, not as a maid, but as the heart of their home. The story of the billionaire and the maid became a legend in their circles, a reminder that the most valuable thing you can give someone isn't protection from the world, but the permission to truly live within it. The greatest tragedy wasn't the accident that paralyzed the boys, it was the fear that paralyzed their father. It took a woman with nothing to show a man who had everything that love isn't about watching over someone, it's about walking, or crawling, beside them. To find more stories of transformation and hope, you can explore the Inspirational Stories archive or learn about supporting those with spinal injuries through the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. True wealth is measured not by what we see through a lens, but by the moments that leave us frozen in awe of the human spirit.